infrastructure senior advisor. I'm a work stream lead in CNTT for Age. CNTT TIP liaison officer, trying to bring and bridge the gap between CNTT and TIP in terms of reference infrastructure senior advisor. I'm a work stream lead in CNTT for Age.
All right, well, thank you, panel. Let's get started. I think the audience may be familiar with CNTT and TIP, but just in case, let's share a little bit infrastructure senior advisor. What is the CNTT and what is TIP? So we have a set of slides here to assist us, and we're going to jump between slides as we go through the panel discussion here. But let's get started. So Ahmed, do you want to talk to us about, who is the CNTT and what do you do?
Yep, CNTT stands for Cloud Infrastructure Telco Task Force. We start late 2018. The target of CNTT itself that we saw there is a lot of problem in terms of telco cloud implementation from operator side. This problem statement or this problem created due to the fact that there is a lot of many combination and silo deployment between the workload owners, which is a vendor in our case, and the infrastructure provider, where is the telco or operator case. So if you see, for any implementation of this telco cloud, we see a lot of combination like SRV, DVDK, and a lot of stacks should be created, which make the operator ROI of telco cloud itself, it is maybe 10 to negative. That's why we bring the idea of CNTT, which we try to build a common infrastructure with all operator and vendors that contributed in CNTT to reduce the TCO, total cost of ownership, to try to make some profiling of infrastructure to make our life easy in terms of certification and verification, and to make full automation of our infrastructure, and to build vendor agnostic infrastructure without any lock-in from any vendor due to the fact of specific feature from like acceleration, like DVDK or SRV. So I hope it's clear from CNTT side.
Oh, thank you. That makes a lot of sense. And you have a pretty big community as well here, I see, across the board, including the Linux Foundation, GSMA. Yep, excellent.
Yep.
Tom, do you want to add anything to what Ahmed just said?
Sure. So if you go to slide 11, so the CNTT consists of a number of different layers of output, which are differently sponsored by different parts. So the reference model was the starting point for the CNTT, and that's specifically owned and sponsored by the GSMA, and that's been recently adopted by them, and that's the source of all requirements for us, and also the Edge work stream that Ahmed mentioned, and also a networking group. They kind of sort of feed into that reference model. The idea then was that for each discrete technology, so the two that we're focusing on is OpenStack and Kubernetes, there'd be a stream of work starting with a reference architecture, leading through to a reference implementation, which is a singular thing for people to be able to deploy in any lab to test their platforms against, or their workloads against, and then a reference conformance suite, which is the test cases that something like OVP or other conformance programs would need to run to assess the conformance of a platform against reference architecture 1 or 2, or a workload that can run on reference, a deployment of something that's conforming to reference architecture 1 or 2. And so the scope of this panel is the work that's being done in reference architecture 2, which is the Kubernetes-based reference architecture for cloud infrastructure for telcos, and how that's being used by TIP within the Open Core project.
Got it. Excellent. All right, let's talk about TIP now that we've mentioned the name a couple of times. So Tarsus, would you like to introduce TIP, and I'll move over to some of your slides. So
sure, yeah. So we go to the next slide. So TIP stands for Telecom Infra Project, And it's a global community of companies, organizations, and other institutions, all working together to accelerate the development and deployment of open and disaggregated technology solutions. So I just want to kind of highlight the part that we are a community. We have a large number of companies, including service providers, technology providers, different institutions, universities, and also like a lot of system integrators and other organizations. We're also, the other thing I want to highlight is that, we are working closely and partnering with other organizations, such as CNTT in this particular discussion, but also with organizations like, GSMA, for example, because our goal is to use and leverage standards, existing standards, but with our focus of, creating like, implementations of different technology solutions and taking them to market. If we actually skip to the next slide, I'd like to spend maybe 30 seconds explaining, why TIP was formed and what are the challenges. I guess most of you are familiar with the challenges in the industry. It's a challenging environment for operators. One of the challenges is that there's, continuously like higher data usage, but the revenues, remain flat or decline. And then the other challenge is that if you look at the ecosystem of vendors today that supply most of the telecom infrastructure, you have more than 80% of the market basically, that is basically controlled by, three vendors. And then a lot of the solutions that are right now supporting the, telecom networks were built based on monolithic designs and, have created like a little bit of a vendor lock-in in the industry. So our goal as a community is to, find ways to bring, solutions that are disaggregated. You have, multiple suppliers providing hardware and software, and also, doing the integration. This will help in turn, like bring down the total cost of ownership and, improve the economics. We are looking at, yes, if you actually go to the next slide.
Yep.
TIP is looking at a broad range of technologies that across access, transport, and core. Looking at different types of deployment use cases. So if you look at the next slide, there are connectivity challenges in every environment, right? Whether it's a rural network, whether it's a 5G greenfield network, or indoor coverage, or even a private network. So our goal is through project groups and through collaboration is to address some of these connectivities and bring the solutions to deployments and to market. If we skip down to slide 21, we have a number of project groups. Sorry, I think you went a little bit too far.
Yeah, I went a little bit too far. Give me a second here.
Wonderful. There, yeah. Thank you, Roy. So the way we work is we have a number of project groups, and the project groups are looking at specific, part of the network, a specific technology. In this example, you can see, we have like groups looking at radio access networks such as Open RAN. Groups looking at the transport. So we have Open Optical and Packet Transport looking at different types of transport technologies, and then we have Open Core, which is looking at the core. And we have a total of probably 14 to 15 project groups, but where we actually bring the community together to look at what are the typical use cases, what are some of the key requirements for a specific technology. We rely a lot on service provider and mobile operators to drive the requirements and signal the demand to the community. And then we work with, the vendor ecosystem, the system integrators and so on to essentially, implement the solution, validate it in a TIP community lab, and then take it to a lab trial and a field trial. So if you go to the next slide, you'll see that we have 14 TIP community labs around the world. In pretty much different locations in every continent. Most of these labs are sponsored by service providers, where they bring together members of the community to work on different solutions. And then if we go to the next slide, our goal is not to just test the solution in the lab, but essentially take it to deployments and make them, help our members take these solutions commercial. Sorry, I think you went one slide further. Sorry. So this is a slide of different, basically a slide showing a number of operators who are TIP members and have taken TIP technologies into like a commercial trial or commercial deployments. So you see a lot of large operators around the world taking some of the most mature technologies coming from groups like Open RAN, cell-site gateways, and other TIP technologies into deployment. So, we're doing the same thing now with Open Core. And as part of this collaboration with CNTT, we're looking forward to, essentially working together and taking some of the Open Core solutions to trials.
Excellent. All right. Well, let's talk about Open Core. Let's see. Ahmed, Stefani, and talk about Open Core and maybe XGVela at this point in time, and then we can take the conversation further from there.
Yeah, thank you very much, Roy. I think, first of all, I want to echo some of the things that the guys on the panel have talked about. We in Mavenir, we strongly believe in everything which is related to virtualizations and containerization. We made actually our company based on that, which we consider really a disruptor in telco. We really think it is the one thing that is going to really change radically the telecom market. But as everything, because we all know that it's coming from IT space, there have been I think some difficulties to just transport it onto telco without really looking initially at what were the differences between IT and telco. And that's where some of the, especially in the core space, we need to be a bit more careful about it, and that's where also Mavenir put some attention. Before getting to that, I also wanted to say that we strongly believe in open competitions and so on, which is what everybody is talking about, no vendor lock-in and so on. And let me just say one last provocative thing, which I believe it may have interest later on in the panel discussions or in questions. We believe that up to today, a lot of operator has been relying on the traditional legacy vendor to implement some of this virtualization. And of course, the legacy vendor has been, let me say, basic in their implementation. They're not really pushed it to what really is important, like Ahmed said before, like Tom said, which is really the automation, the lifecycle management, all those things that actually makes virtualization really a difference. So in our space, and maybe you can bring up the one slide that I have just as a background. What is important is that, as we say, in telco, still there is some differences from IT. There are some clear differences that actually make it telco if you want, peculiar. And some of these requirements are actually quite important when you go and talk to the big operators. They will always ask you about legal intercept. They will always ask you about high availability and so on. And those are the layers that we believe, in some cases, in some of the PaaS platform as a service, they're not actually there to the level that are actually needed. So Mavenir has been participating in all these entities, in TIP, in CNTT, and so on. But specifically because we're talking here mainly for core, we have been contributing the XGVela, where we have actually worked very hard in trying to define what we call a Mavenir Telco Cloud integration layer, which you can see in the picture with the red frame, where fundamentally what happens is that you extend some of the capability and you put it on top of the general pass, and you make it very specific to some of the telco requirements, which in some of the more generic open sources are not available. Of course, as a Mavenir, we intended to open source this development because the goal is not to keep it as a proprietary thing in the spirit of competition, but to make it really easy for a software vendor to be able to enter in the market and achieve that freedom, to be introduced and avoid the locking we're talking about. That's essential, because what we have seen is that very often some of these capabilities which have been introduced, they are really not providing all those capabilities, and the operator or the service provider or the client in general tends to be slowing down because they don't see some of their main requirements fulfilled. And as such, they fall back again to the traditional legacy vendor in a more monolithic development. And that's what I think we wanted to instead encourage. And that's why, as a Mavenir, beyond our own application, we have pushed a lot on all these layers, CAS, PaaS, and so on, in order to make sure that everybody can compete, because we think innovation comes from competition.
Got it. Well, thank you, Stefano. So with regard to XG Bella or other initiatives, what are the specific areas in terms of the sort of CNTT and TIP collaboration? Any concrete examples or working groups that you want to talk about? Anyone on the panel?
So maybe we can maybe spend a couple of minutes talk a little bit about what we're doing in OpenCore and how we collaborate with CNTT. And this is essentially an intersection of the software application with the underlying infrastructure. I think that's our focus for this collaboration. So OpenCore is a project group in TIP, and as you see, actually, if you can go to slide 24, we have a very simple goal. We want to develop and bring to market cloud native and converged core solutions that support 4G, 5G, and Wi-Fi access. And some of the key design principles and tenets of this project are some of the items that Stefano just highlighted. So we're talking about basically cloud native design and building a core network on microservices architecture. We're focusing on having like an orchestration framework that can actually implement like all the lifecycle management for the core microservices, and then an automation framework and the tools to be able to easily essentially integrate and deploy the code into different types of infrastructure. And our goal is for these solutions to be not only access agnostic, but also infrastructure agnostic to the extent possible. So have the capability and the flexibility to deploy in different types of infrastructure. And we understand that, I think, each operator environment can be, will be different. And, in some cases you'll have like some centralized cloud locations, edge cloud, different types of NFVI and so on. And that's where we actually see a lot of value in collaborating with organizations like CNTT, because our focus here from the core project group is more on the application and how we optimize the software and validate it and help like our partners, our members actually take products to market. CNTT has done actually great great work to essentially consolidate requirements from from the service provider side and come up with a reference architecture for cloud native infrastructure. So what we did in the case of OpenCore, instead of defining yet another set of requirements, we basically partner closely with CNTT. And in our first lab trial, we are implementing the cloud native infrastructure based on RA2, and our goal here is to see how the software essentially and the different functions will perform on that infrastructure. What optimizations are needed, and how you can scale depending on what is the use case and the requirements, and then share these learnings back with our community, but also back with CNTT, so we can actually as part of this relationship see how we can drive towards like a more streamlined and unified architecture. So this is like I'd like to bring this as an example, and maybe other panelists have some more thoughts on this.
Yeah, I have a comment here. Due to the fact that the panel is focused on open core project and how CNTT tried to support the open core project in terms of cloud native infrastructure or container infrastructure. Actually, we have two types of cooperation between TIP. One of them is open core and the other is open RAN. Due to the fact that the open RAN is directly affect the edge work stream, which I'm leading in CNTT. And not only the open RAN, open core, we have a lot of discussion with our colleague in TIP that, for example, if you have UPF, which is cloud native, and we need to achieve some edge use cases, so we need to take the open core UPF, which is a cloud native application, as that's mentioned, and try to position it over the edge data center to achieve edge use cases that help for sure for enabling 5G more use cases. So the cooperation between CNTT and TIP is covering a lot of verticals and aspects. One of them, the core part, is open core for sure, and how open core can fit in RA2 and edge work stream, as well as the open RAN. And the beauty of open RAN and edge cooperation, we try to achieve what Stefano mentioned in his slides, that heterogeneous infrastructure. Right now, we are working with TIP to define what is requirements in terms of FPGAs for acceleration of Open RAN deployment. We try to have cooperation between ORAN Alliance in terms of application abstraction layer, which is layer to make sure that all the CPUs, GPUs, FPGAs underneath, it should be abstracted, totally abstracted, just expose API to the Open RAN VNF or CNF like DU or CU. So there is a lot of effort between /ORAN and CNTT to try to accelerate the complete 5G with new radio, which is based on Open RAN in some cases for sure, and try to have it end-to-end cooperation. A last comment from my side for Xvella. I like this project big time. As Stefano mentioned, is the first project. For sure, it is seed project in Linux Foundation. But the beauty of this project is that the telco industry right now shift their mindset from pure telco to IT. The past terminology is purely public cloud terminology and IT terminology is the platform as a service. So right now, we success as the operator and the vendor which working with us to achieve infrastructure as a service. Right now, we are working to have container as a service, which is a focus of RA2 and CNTT, and Xvella is covering the PaaS as a service to make sure that we're covering all layer and we can achieve what SNV from 2012 promised to us in terms of full automation, full lifecycle management, full flexibility, full scaling, and all this stuff.
Yeah, no, I hear you. Ever since the carriers got together and published that seminal white paper in 2012 at the Layer 123 show, actually, interestingly enough, we're at the same show 8 years later, and NFV hasn't delivered on the full promise, right, collectively. And I think, and Stefano made a good point, which is that some of the vendors were not able to move it forward, and the telcos waiting for the vendors to make it happen was difficult, right? Some vendors made further progress, and some didn't. But in general, I think the CNTT was something that was really needed to move it forward, and I'm glad that actually is in fact happening. And now, obviously, we still. Yes, Stefano, go ahead, please.
Yeah, I just wanted to add that what Ahmed said is absolutely correct, and we also envisage that, of course, despite there are two different sides looking at Open RAN and Open Core, but at the end we're still looking at making sure that whatever CAS pass, it is usable for both core and RAN, because on the other side, we also want to make sure that then orchestration becomes even simpler, and you don't have to start to deploy a myriad or a numerous amount of different container or virtualized environment, which has always been a part of a problem in this first part of deployment of virtualized technology. So, of course, there are different characteristics, like in the RAN, Ahmed mentioned some of the acceleration stuff which are required for processing and so on. And in the core instead, there are some slightly different things, but still the whole thing should really come out from the same framework and the same architecture, such that really we are talking about, the same CAS-PaaS environment, or an homogeneous one for RAN and for core.
Yeah, and it should be, right? It should be the underlying, sort of universal telco cloud, if you will, right? That takes into account the edge use cases, because for me, the edge is just another location, right? And yes, they have different constraints, right? Core and edge have different constraints, but it's just one more location. And if you treat those separately, you say, well, the edge has many more of those in the few core, then you end up in not a good place again, right? As we've learned. And the reality is, right? Yeah. Yes.
But I think, Roy, I think one thing is the location, like a core and edge, and one thing is the application, core and RAN, right? Sometimes we use core, but actually core location is different from a core application, right? So you're absolutely right. Normally a core application sits in a core location, but actually when we're seeing with Mac and the other stuff, we started to see UPF, as Ahmed said, goes towards the edge. And at the same time for RAN, we see or RRUs and stuff, maybe DU in some cases, separated. But then CU is definitely in a core location. So
that's correct.
I think that's really the game of it, yeah?
It is. It's a distributed computing problem, right, in reality. And you want a common platform to. And the fact that you have FPGAs that maybe appear more often in the edge doesn't mean that FPGAs shouldn't appear in the core, because it's workload dependent, right? Or smart links, right?
Absolutely. Right. And that's where these feedback loops with if we call them community implementations within Open Core and Open RAN of the CNTT reference architecture, those feedback loops of the workload requirements back into the architecture requirements, they can drive more specific groupings of specification. So you can then more easily within the test cases say, okay, so this platform needs to support these use cases, these particular applications, regardless of location, but just what's the workload requirement. These are the tests I need to run to make sure that what I'm deploying is conforming, and therefore I know that the application will work.
And you have a complicated problem.
Yeah. It's not easy. Those feedback loops need to be relatively robust.
So as much as you're going to see, you said more processing, also some accelerators in the core space. The same would be for seeing more memory and processing at the edge, where you can start to look at it as a kind of micro data centers where you can start to build applications on top of it. So I think it's really the nature and the beauty of these, which I believe the today legacy is not able to handle it, because it was specifically done in order to support a specific framework.
Right. And I think what's exciting about what you guys are doing from a cloud native platform is the distributed nature of the applications themselves, right? You start by assuming that the application decomposes into a set of collaborating services, some of which may run in the core, some of which may run in the edge. But what's the definition of edge? Because it's a continuum, essentially. And working on a common platform, I think that's pretty powerful. Because, at the end of the day, what we wanted to do with network functions was we wanted to virtualize them, disaggregate them, and then, you want to place them where they need to be, or the components need to be, right? There's a placement problem here that's pretty complicated. And I think so to have CNTT and TIP collaborate and work, I think, on the common platform, but pick the core use cases, like, Open RAN being a use case, if you will, and making it happen and taking that feedback loop, right? That's pretty exciting, because in many cases, a lot of people are considering the Open RAN and the vRAN or the Cloud RAN, pick your favorite. Obviously there's precise definitions, but from the outside, it's like, it looks like one big thing, right? So it's just, you're just breaking it apart. That is one of the first telco use case for edge, right? Potentially. It's an internal use case, but it's an important use case. Right?
Great, Roy. Yes. Yeah, right. Yes. Very, very, very good point, Roy. When you mentioned in terms of operator strategy to build the MEC or edge use cases, all of operators right now try to achieve most ROI for their business and try to make more revenue stream. So when we start to build the edge data center, we think about use cases. if we see a lot of use cases, it cannot be achieved with the current deployment. So the vRAN or Open RAN, as you mentioned right now, as a complete umbrella for all the terminologies, open space RAN, consider the first use case. First use case, yeah.
Yeah, open space RAN, open RAN, capital O, lowercase o, right? O RAN, but O RAN Alliance, right? And then
make sure you don't get it wrong. Otherwise, it's a problem.
People get upset. It's like ORAN. No, it's ORAN Alliance, right? Not just ORAN, right? And then it's So but no, it's exciting project. So what are as you guys collaborate? Certainly, there are some challenges that you have to work through, right, between organizations and in terms of what you're seeing out there, right? What are some of the things that you guys have had to overcome as collaborating groups, and as you look back at the work that you all have done?
Great question. I think one of the biggest challenges is actually on this slide, which is the orchestrator layer. So yes, we're kind of focusing this panel on the relationship between communities, looking at an open platform and abstracting resources and so on. But actually, you mentioned earlier, Roy, about being able to orchestrate workload placement, based on criteria. That requires a very robust orchestration layer and capability. And we all know 5G, network slicing and network service orchestration and so on. I think that's a really key capability and probably a challenge for many operators and network vendors to get right.
Yeah, I echo Tom a lot in this space, because even in the time of just NFVI, orchestration has always been the last bit that everybody has been thinking about. And there have been also different trends from different operators, with some people thinking they wanted a super intelligent kind of configurators, look at the AT&T space versus others. But I think that we need to do a lot of work. And I do believe that the other area of the next area of focus for all of us beyond this is going to be the orchestration. So I agree 100% with Tom. The other little challenge is more a sort of making sure that everybody is aligned, because of course there are different interests from commercial spaces. So there are some people who may be slowing down a bit, but we are moving from there. So I think I would agree with Tom that the biggest challenge is really in the orchestrator, because that will really make a significant difference. And the orchestrator is really something that applies to a totally virtualized, containerized environment. You cannot really afford to have any legacy in between.
No, you can't.
Yeah, in terms of technology, like a gentleman mentioned, he's an orchestrator, but your question, I think, is related to cooperation between TIP and CNTT. I will echo what Tess has mentioned from his earlier discussion. TIP realized big time that they don't need to reinvent the wheel and to start to define the infrastructure from scratch and start to collect operator requirements. So they give CNTT the upper hand for infrastructure part, and in CNTT we try to avail this common infrastructure, this cloud native infrastructure based on CNTT RA2 to TIP to start to onboard their application. So in terms of the challenges or in terms of cooperation between two organizations, from my point of view, that I'm a liaison officer between the two organizations, I think we are in very good shape between TIP and CNTT. Due to the fact that we have demarcation point, and they TIP especially know very well how effort CNTT colleagues done to make this common infrastructure and expose it to the application, wherever the application to be onboarded on this common infrastructure. So I don't think there is a lot of challenge between two organizations.
That's good. No, I think I'm right, because if you look at sometimes you have multiple organizations, competition is sometimes good, but sometimes on something like this, you actually need to come together. And so when the CNTT and the OPNFV, Linux Foundation, the combination, I think helps so that there's one common group, right? That's as you work through the mind meld or the merge, right? I think that's certainly an important element as you move forward. And so I think that's good. And obviously O-RAN Alliance that we've all talked about, bringing them in under the umbrella, and the ONF with the SD-RAN project, at least it's it's conversations, right? I think that's important to have conversations going on and have the collaboration, because it's a big effort. It's a big project. And
by the way, GSMA right now there is open infrastructure task force looking for open RAN and open space RAN, and they're working right now with TIP, and especially TIP. And there is a subgroup in Telco Task Force, in Open Infrastructure Telco Task Force, looking for how the challenges that the open RAN and open core and open terminology itself can be addressed from GSMA. So I think there is a lot of cooperation right now between the complete SDOs and the open source community to make sure that we are not reinventing the wheel and we are not duplicate the work between each other. What
there's a lot of work to be done. So speaking of a lot of work to be done, collectively as CNTT and TIP, how can people help? How, let's say this is an open recruitment call for assistance. This is a big project, right? We have CNTT, we have TIP, we have O-RAN Alliance, we have ONF, we have a lot of organizations interested in this and interested in making this all successful. So what kind of help are you guys looking for? And what's the benefit of joining or coming in and helping? Anyone want to start?
Yeah, I think I can go first. So from the TIP perspective, I think first of all, if I look at the CNTT membership, for example, I think if I look at all the logos on the slide, we have a lot of members in common. So a lot of like the operators and the OEMs and the SIs are basically the same company. So I think that makes things easier, right? The other thing is, as I'm looking at specifically on the Open Core project that I'm co-leading, I think where we are right now in the journey is we started this project early in 2020, and we have just released our first set of technical requirements for a 5G core. These are actually publicly available, so you can get them from the TIP website. So our focus right now is on the implementation and on actually having actual solutions validated in the lab, right? So where we need the most, I think, contributions and participation is having actually, the members, collaborating and bringing, their part of the solution, their expertise, like whether it's a company that's building orchestration software or like some automation tools, or even like, core network functions, come and participate in the discussions, share or contribute to the areas of your expertise. And, I think our focus right now is on essentially taking these solutions into the labs, validating them, testing for, like performance, scalability, automation, and so on. And then as we learn more, kind of go back and share the learnings with, through white papers or through demos or, through test results, and through conferences, right? So, I think that the main area where, I think we can, we're looking for more participation is actually, look at the requirements for the different project groups and the different efforts in TIP, and try to bring your solution in a TIP lab and work with the service providers to take it to a trial.
Perfect. All right. Well, thank you.
Yeah.
Well, any other words before we go to Q&A, or are we good?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. In terms of getting involved with CNTT, we're always on the lookout for more people to join the community. As well as adding logos to the board here, just individuals getting involved with the various work streams. I think the main focus is on the Kubernetes side at the moment are trying to close the gaps in terms of understanding those workload requirements that I mentioned, and making sure that we've got a really robust set of input into the architecture and the implementations and then the conformance tests. And I think anyone who's involved, whether you want to be involved in requirements gathering and kind of traceability, whether you want to be involved in, actually building and implementing Kubernetes reference implementations, or writing and defining test cases for the conformance end. All of those work streams are wanting and desiring more people to help. So yeah, if anyone's interested, please either get in contact with me or search for CNTT. There's a wiki on the LFN, the Linux Foundation Networking wiki, which can kind of signpost people.
Excellent. Well, thank you, panel. And we're going to go ahead and move to questions. If you have questions, go ahead and use the Q&A window to submit it. And the panel will be happy to take your questions. If for some reason we run out of time before we get to all the questions, not to worry, we'll try to get back to you after the panel. But again, it's rare that we have a panel of experts on these topics. So ask away. And with that, let's just go to Q&A. Hi, panel. Are you all here? Hi, Ahmed. I see you. All right.
Yes. Hi, Ray.
Excellent. Well, thank you all for making it. And thank you, audience, for staying with us here and asking questions. We really appreciate it. And especially those of us who stayed up late. Thank you, Tassos. Really appreciate that. All right, let's go ahead and take the questions. And again, audience, go ahead and ask your questions live. We are real. We're not bots. We're actually here and able to interact with you. Slightly delayed, but we are here in fact. So go ahead and ask your questions away. Use the question interface on the chat to do that. Let's go with the first question. And I'm going to ask you of the panel. Go ahead and feel free to jump in if you have opinions on that. So first question, to make the maintenance of the network easier, this individual and his company are developing systems for documentation and supporting templates. How does the TIP project plan on reducing the human resources maintenance of networks? In other words, reducing the effort that humans have to maintain the network. Any of the panelists want to take that one?
Yeah, I'm happy to start since this is about the TIP project. So yeah, thanks for the question. I think it's in the context of Open Core. I think we are we have two work streams, one on orchestration and one on automation, and definitely it's an area of active work. As part of the orchestration, we're looking at automating some of the processes around lifecycle management of different core network functions and microservices. And then as part of automation, we're looking at things, implementing tools and frameworks for automating some of the deployment aspects of a core network. So this is some of the work we're doing in Open Core. The other thing that I want to highlight is that last week we announced, TIP announced as part of a virtual event we had last Tuesday, a new solutions project group, which is looking at more end-to-end architectures and end-to-end solutions. And the name of this solutions group is called Open Automation. So one of the goals is to look at improving the operational economics for end-to-end network operations, and providing basically service agility and operational agility to service providers. So this is a new effort. So this is another way we're looking at this problem from an end-to-end perspective.
Excellent. Thank you, Tassos. Thank you for that answer. Let's move on to the next question here. The next question here is, what are the timescales for the first fruits of your collaboration? And if you could maybe focus a bit in terms of real use beyond the initial POC use cases. Anyone want to talk about I guess that's sort of the time frames here?
Well, I can do that, Roy. As you know, I come from vendor's world. I think that there are several steps, of course, but already today there are some existing open core capabilities, so we don't have to forget about that. It's just the extent of how you embrace the deployment of it. But if we talk about you know, the specific open core, as we just mentioned during the panel, we see very much like 2021 as a significant step because of more wider adoptions of containers. And from that point of view, we should see even more automation. What instead, as the audience have followed from the discussion, what probably will take a bit more is the overall orchestration. I think Tom had made a hint on the fact that there's still a bit of work to be done in that space, and myself, I do believe is the real next step that needs to be tackled. But I think that sometimes you don't have to wait for everything to be ready, because if you wait for everything to be ready, you never get there. So at least in my working experience, I always try to be on the edge, because you learn much more. So what you gain in learning is much more than what you gain by waiting, you know, that everything is ready. So I would say that already today in 2020, we got stuff, we just need to embrace it. In 2021 is really containers year. Let's call it the year of the container, also because 2020 has not been a fantastic year so far, unfortunately. And orchestration will have to put the effort to make it, you know, to make it really become, you know, a differentiator.
I think that's fair. Yeah, 2020, maybe we strike that year and we skip to 2021 in terms of projections. But thank you, Stefano, for those time scales. Very, very helpful. And let's see. Let's move on to the next question here. What's your opinion around the overall security of the open platform, open core, open RAN? I know that's been some discussions and debate a little bit about the open RAN portion. Thoughts about security of the open core project, the stuff that you guys are working on? Anyone?
Before anyone says anything, I'll just make a comment. I think that security is something that has to be looked not to market something, but to make it secure. So no matter what is the solutions, security needs to be a priority. And as such, I know for sure, because we have been extensively involved and my colleagues here are too, security is always a basic requirement. So no solutions is actually viable unless there is a security requirement. So for me, that's closed most of the conversation. And and when you talk open, normally means also more secure in the sense that there is transparency. But I don't want it to enter into more generic terms, you know, but definitely is a basic requirement. So.
Absolutely. Anyone else have thoughts on this around, you know, open, secure, open, not secure? Tom, I think, any thoughts maybe?
Oh, go ahead. Yep. Yeah, I mean, I was going to say.
Oh, hey, Tassos, go ahead. Yes.
Sorry. I mean, yeah, I was just going to say a couple of things. So yeah, I do agree with Stefano that you know, the fact that you have like open architecture and open interfaces doesn't necessarily mean that it's less secure. I think that's something important to highlight. And the other thing is, you know, as we kind of go into like, you know, different architectures, and with 5G you have like a more distributed architecture with edge clouds and multiple locations and so on. These are things that have to be looked at. But I think from a overall like approach, I think there's a couple of principles that are important. One is like basically have an implementation that is secure by design. So, implement security as part of development process and test process and automation process. So it's not something that is like an afterthought. And then the other thing is pretty much look at it from end to end. And in, the same way you have like continuous integration and continuous deployment, for like solutions like open core, start thinking about continuous security, which includes not only the design and the testing, but also things like, implementing like, monitoring tools and like, automation tools that actually can, kind of quickly identify risks and, provide basically the ability to come to like solutions and so on. Sorry, Tom, I thought you were going to say something.
Got it. Well, thank you, Tassos. Appreciate that. Let's move to the next question here. Next question. Talking about edge, a telco specific edge cloud or an all-purpose edge cloud. Thoughts? Maybe we start with Ahmed here. I think Tom says you're the edge guy.
Yep, the edge is the most big thing in the industry right now, and but I need to settle the ground here, and we should agree about the edge. Edge is cloud by the end of the day, but as we know, it is a cloud with some constraints. And right now, the fight or the competition between operators and hyperscaler is reside at the edge. Who will build the edge first, and how can monetize his network with the edge? Especially the Telco Edge Cloud. I'm lucky that I'm leading a vice chair of Telco Edge Cloud in GSMA. So the point here is that we need to start to monetize and open the service provider network as a PaaS platform as a service to start to monetize the operator infrastructure, and to have interconnect and most properly interconnect between operator each other to start to have something called network as a service from operator to operator. For sure, as I mentioned, the hyperscaler right now, they're looking for this this piece of cake, which is the edge, and try to achieve what they're looking for, like AWS wavelength, for example, for 5G, and from Google, and Azure Edge Stack from Microsoft. So the competition, it will be reside at the edge. Whoever try to build the edge and bring complete use cases, you will win the race.
I think that's a good perspective for sure. Palm, anything to add to Ahmed's?
Yeah, I think the interesting thing about the question is it kind of asks whether it's going to be one or the other, and at the end of the day, we're going to need cloud for kind of telco customer apps, things gaming, smart city, smart this, that, and the other. We're also going to need edge cloud for telco applications. Yep. So the RAN applications, the core applications that are going towards the edge, and they may have similar requirements. They may have discrete requirements, and so I'm not sure it's an either or for me.
Yep. And finally, there's an on-prem edge at the enterprise potentially, right? And
yeah, there's MPN. Yeah, absolutely.
Many edges to this story for sure. Absolutely. Yeah. All right, audience, keep those questions coming. I mean, thank you. We really appreciate you interacting and engaging the panel. Not all panels are live. We're special that way. But actually, I think the next panel is live too. But anyhow, but this has been a good conversation. There is one question. I know it's not exactly aligned with the topic of presentation, but given that we have a couple of folks here, I'm hoping that maybe one of you can answer the questions. And the question here goes around, CPRI, so the front hall. With regard to CPRI, what do you think about CPRI over Ethernet solution? Does it reduce the cost of solution for RAN? Now, obviously, there's also eCPRI. But anyone want to take this, or maybe we can punt it to a different panel?
I can start with.
I can start, Roy. First of all, CPRI, we know it's a framework, so it's actually not a standardized interface. Everyone implements it the way they want it, and it has been tested that actually it doesn't run on Ethernet because it's not efficient enough. It requires fiber. So maybe they are talking about the eCPRI or 7.2 interface, which is the base of the Open RAN. I think I do value a lot that, not because in a normal deployment scenario. So if we think that we just replace the biggest sites where we have a lot of traffic to backhaul, then you need fiber anyhow because you have a lot of traffic. So there is no point in looking at Ethernet. But if you think of scenarios where you actually densify urban areas and you start to deploy a lot of cells, that in this case, I don't want to call small cells because then it's always an argument about small cells. But I call it lower capacity cells. So means, one carrier or things like that. But you deploy many in order to have a more granular deployment, increasing the densifying the coverage. What happens is that actually you don't need a whole fiber to backhaul the traffic because you have a small cells. And here I call small cell, which is low capacity cells. And in that case, actually, Ethernet becomes a very good way to backhaul because it's actually easier to find in places for deployment. We need to remember that we can lower down the cost of everything, but then one of the most important is to facilitate the deployment because, acquisition of site, deployment of base station, and trying to reduce the amount of infrastructure that you need to deploy, and through the Ethernet, being able to actually centralize some processing capacity, like in the DU and CU. I mean, for those who are specialized in Open RAN, they know what I mean. And not necessarily centralize all in one place, but to have some aggregation point. And that brings a completely new way of deployment, which we do believe actually have a significant value. So yes, there is a value still in Ethernet as a backhaul, but in a specific deployment, not just carrying a lot of traffic, because that won't be enough. I hope I addressed the question, but it's to my heart, this question. So I speak a lot about this because a lot of people say, oh, you need fiber. Yeah, you need if you think always in the same way. But virtualization, containerization, open is about thinking different as well.
Absolutely. Gives us a lot more flexibility. And with that, thank you, Stefano. Thank you, panel. Thank you, Ahmed. Thank you, Tassos. Thank you, Tom. And thank you for making the time to answer questions live on this Q&A. Thank you, audience, for sending your questions in and keeping us engaged. Really appreciate it. And with that, we're going to wrap our panel. Stay tuned for the next upcoming panel. It's going to be pretty exciting as well. And so with that, thank you very much.